This is Muriro on Monday on Star FM. Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
Star FM sounding good all the time. Thank you for making us your number one. Hello and welcome. I am Linda Muriro. Government's economic blueprint, the National Development Strategy NDS1, recognizes that bold and transformative measures are key towards realization of Vision 2030, that is, Zimbabwe becoming an upper middle income economy by the year 2030. The NDS1 is premised on promoting good governance and its key pillars of transparency and accountability. Government, through the NDS1 blueprint, has committed to the anti-corruption drive through the following: capacitating institutions such as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the Zimbabwe Republic Police, as well as the judiciary, to ensure uncompromised implementation of justice, putting in place a system to protect whistleblowers who report corruption through enacting an Act of Parliament, as well as enforcement of assets forfeiture. The NDS1 is being implemented at a time Zimbabwe is ranked poorly on the Global Corruption Perception Index. Tonight, we delve deep into the issue of corruption and its impact on Zimbabwe's economic growth trajectory. Stay with us.
This is Muriro on Monday on Star FM. Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
And I'm joined in studio tonight by Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission ZAC spokesperson, Commissioner Thandiwe Mlobane, Justice Legal and Parliamentary Committee Chairperson, Honorable Energy Mutodi, Principal Public Prosecutor in charge of Provincial Courts, Harare Magistrates Court, National Prosecuting Authority of Zimbabwe, Mr. Tafara Chirambira, as well as Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIAZ Head of Programs, Ngobani Kabangu. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
I will start with Commissioner Mlobane. Can you outline some of the major achievements that ZAC has made in fighting corruption thus far?
Thank you very much. The Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission has, since 2019 to date, been fighting corruption using a two-pronged approach. That is investigation for prosecution and asset recovery, as well as prevention of corruption through a number of interventions that include ensuring that public institutions implement the Auditor General's recommendations as a means to ensuring that strong institutions are in place, as well as arresting and bringing for prosecution through the NPA all those that would have committed crimes of corruption. And I want to hasten to say, to date, from 2019 to date, we have arrested more than 400 public officials, with 60% of those being high profile.
All right. There is a new sheriff at the National Prosecuting Authority, and ZAC has, over the years, despite the wins that you talk about, been complaining about the slow pace of prosecution of corruption cases by the NPA. Given that there is a new PG, Justice Lois Matanda Moyo, what are your expectations, Commissioner Mlobane?
Both the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission and NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, are institutions mandated to fight corruption and crime as per Chapter 13 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, Amendment number 28 of 2013. ZAC's mandate includes investigations and exposing corruption and other related financial crimes in both the public and the private sectors as per Section 255A of the Constitution. NPA is the institution charged with the responsibility of instituting prosecution on behalf of the state as per Section 258 of the Constitution. The appointment of the PG, Honorable Justice Matanda Moyo, works in ZAC's favor as she has the experience on investigations of corruption and prosecution of these cases. Therefore, there will be objective scrutiny of the corruption cases referred to the NPA. Section 255(1) ZAF mandates ZAC to refer matters to NPA for prosecution. As always, anti-corruption courts, which are in almost all provinces, prioritize the prosecution of corruption cases and other economic crimes. So ZAC is looking forward to enjoying amplified cordial relations and inter-agency cooperation with the NPA. ZAC and NPA have a memorandum of understanding signed in 2020 and have agreed to cooperate.
All right. Now, Honorable Mutodi, as a legislator with an oversight and a representative role, how do you rate Zimbabwe's anti-graft drive?
Thank you. The Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission has performed very well according to their 2022 report. In that report, they reported that they managed to have a success rate of 72%, which means they managed to get convictions on 72% cases that they handled. So it's quite an achievement, given that they were established recently. They've managed to process so many corruption cases, and they've managed to unearth corruption and classify it in terms of its sources: public sector corruption constituting the majority of cases, and private sector corruption as well. So we look forward that they are going to continue with this work, and we look forward to a community without corruption, a community which has people who are actually knowledgeable about how corruption can be handled. So as an organization, they've managed very well. We are very happy.
Now, Honorable Mutodi, is the legal framework, in your view, under which ZAC operates adequate for it to effectively discharge its mandate?
Yes, the legal frameworks are correct. They are in place. As you are aware that ZAC is properly constituted according to our constitution, as he has indicated, the law that is constituting the organization. However, we still believe that we can still improve the effectiveness of ZAC based on the recommendations that the practitioners or the anti-corruption commissioners can come up with. They can come up with any suggestion, any recommendation that we can then put before Parliament, debate it and make it law. If it helps in the improvement of the operation of ZAC, and if it helps in ensuring that more corrupt cases can be brought before the Commission and they can be processed as quickly as possible. They wanted some arresting powers, but as he has said, they have a memorandum of understanding on the agreement with the National Prosecuting Authority, whereby the cases they investigate are quickly processed by the NPA. And now that the previous commissioner for ZAC, that's Honorable Matanda Moyo, is now the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority director there. It means that she has an understanding on how the ZAC issues need to be handled, how quickly the agency that is needed, and I'm sure it is going to enhance their operations.
All right, and Ngobani, coming to you as an independent body, a watchdog as far as corruption is concerned, are you happy with Zimbabwe's anti-corruption drive?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to this platform. Well, a lot can be done. I think if we look at the statistics, the data that has been produced over the years, they're indicative that not much has been done progressively in terms of the fight against corruption. For example, if you look at the Corruption Perceptions Index, Zimbabwe has dropped 1 point and is actually at a score of 23 out of 100. So this on its own is a serious concern. And also, if you also rank Zimbabwe in terms of the 180 countries that are involved in that particular study or the index, you find that Zimbabwe scores about 157 out of 180. So for all these, the data at hand is telling that there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of improving or responding effectively to corruption. However, there is some progressive movement in terms of framing, in terms of responding to corruption. For example, one of the most progressive documents in the fight against corruption, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, is one of the most, I think, in my view, it's a very detailed document because it actually frames, it promotes coordination amongst the anti-corruption actors. But however, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of responding effectively to corruption. Some of the issues that need to be tackled at this stage is the aspect of political will. There's a need to actually ensure that also the bureaucrats in the offices respond, actually buy into the anti-corruption initiative. Secondly, we also need to strengthen the legal frameworks. For example, the whistleblower protection legislation can actually assist in terms of strengthening the fight against corruption. I think there are so many issues that need to be dealt with in Zimbabwe that actually assist us in terms of responding to corruption. As it stands, there's a lot that needs to be done in the context of Zimbabwe.
You've mentioned some of the things that you view as that need to be addressed. What would you attribute to Zimbabwe's low ranking on that global corruption perception index? Zimbabwe is ranked 157 out of 180 countries. What do you attribute that to?
I mentioned one aspect in terms of the political will. We need to ensure that we don't respond to corruption in terms of the rhetoric, but actually create systems that actually effectively respond to corruption. Secondly, our legislation, the whistleblower protection, currently, most citizens are not confident in terms of reporting corruption. That needs to be dealt with. Also, we need to be able to ensure that there's a conducive ease of doing business, for example. You find that for one to actually conduct business, they have to either bribe and so forth, and they are all that on its own is actually a deterring factor in terms of responding to corruption. So these and other factors help in terms of dealing with corruption in Zimbabwe.
Interesting you should talk about the ease of doing business. On the show last week, we had public transport operators who were bemoaning systems around ease of doing business, where some combi operators were saying despite having the requisite documentation for them to be able to operate, their operations are being affected, thereby leaving combi operators without the papers, having free reign over the roads, and also the issue of corruption by police officers. So thank you for bringing that up, and I hope that we will also be able to touch on that. Now, Tafara, coming to you, the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, stands accused of weak prosecution and political interference in its activities, which some have said frustrates anti-corruption efforts, since accused persons either end up being acquitted or the prosecution process takes very long to be finalized. Your comment on this and how this challenge or perceptions are being addressed?
Thank you. Well, I will start by what the legislator says. He says that there have been 72% success rate, conviction rate over the past year. To me, 72% implies that's a B+. So I first of all want to do away with the perception that there is no conviction. People are walking scot-free. People are being convicted. We have several high-profile names, some in prison as I speak. Those people do not just end up in prison. They're actually prosecuted successfully and prosecutions completed. So when we look at it, you find there is a perception, which I believe is wrong, to say that the NPA does not prosecute. The NPA has let people go. What we need to understand, what we need to look at as Zimbabweans is who exactly has created that perception and who is the beneficiary of the belief that you can get away with corruption. Why has the reporting at times seemed to suggest that nothing has been done? 72%, like I'm saying, is a B+. If my son comes home with 72%, I'll be very proud. They have passed. And then the issue to do with the NPA being accused of political interference in its activities. Again, that's a perception that has been created out there. But let's look at the political divide. Let's look at the political landscape. convictions that the NPA has managed to get with regards to anti-corruption cases, they have gone across the political divide. If it were in politics, we've created a government of national unity in prison there. We've put people from different political parties because we don't look at the political party, we look at the offense. So my thinking is, I think it's about the perception that we have created as a country. And what we then need to ask ourselves is who has created that perception and who is the ultimate beneficiary of that perception.
And there's been this issue that has even been spoken of by the president at one point, the issue of catch and release. How would you comment on that as the NPA? And I'll also throw the same question to Zach, the issue of catch and release. And I'm even looking at some of the messages that are coming through on our studio WhatsApp platform. The issue of catch and release. Hi Linda, Zach, ne NPA, the catch and release idzo. This is from Tatenda, We're United, Pachi Town. How would you respond to this?
At least Tatenda supports Man United, so me and him will agree on that part. Now, again, it's about who has created the perception and who is the beneficiary of that perception that there is a catch and release at the courts. You see, obviously our courts, the NPA, Zach, we all perform our functions within the confines of the law. Let's take, for instance, an issue of bail. If you are arrested right now, our constitution says automatically you should be granted bail unless there are compelling reasons. So already the NPA and ZACA are starting from a standpoint where we have to convince the court that, no, wait a minute, this person might run away. This person might interfere with witnesses. But the default position is that once arrested, so when the person gets bail, it doesn't mean that they are not guilty. It simply means the court has said they may attend trial coming from home. But the perception out there is once released on bail, it means the person should go. So on our part, what with the initiative that we have set on as the NPA is to make sure that at least the public out there understands the legal processes.
All right, and what do you make of Zimbabwe's low ranking on the global corruption perception index? We heard from Ngobani that Zimbabwe is ranked 157 out of 180 countries that are on that list. What do you make of that?
Like my colleague said earlier, there is work to be done. But because there is work to be done, it doesn't mean that work has not been done.
Muriro on Monday on Star FM.
Now, Commissioner Mlobane, earlier on, Ngobane spoke about the issue of political will. There is a perception that there is lack of commitment in dealing with cases where politically exposed persons are implicated in corruption scandals, but often escaping investigations. As Zach, how are you addressing this as part of boosting confidence in the country's anti-corruption drive?
Thank you. I want to first of all talk about the legislative framework to combat corruption that Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption uses. The country is a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, which it signed in 2004. It's also a signatory to the African Union Convention on Prevention and Combating Corruption, which was signed in 2007, and the SADC Protocol Against Corruption, signed in 2006. These international treaties on combating corruption provide for Zimbabwe to criminalize bribery and corruption and strengthen interagency and international cooperation, as well as preventative measures against corruption. And Zimbabwe has domesticated the provisions of these international conventions and protocols in accordance with Section 34 of the Constitution. And you find that in Section 9(1)(b) of the Constitution, it requires that state entities to put in place measures to expose, combat, and eradicate all forms of corruption. And then Section 255A mandates ZAC to investigate all forms of corruption in both the public and the private sectors, as well as promoting transparency, accountability, integrity, and financial discipline. In simpler terms, ZAC is fighting against corruption based on the legislative framework that is in place. And as a strategy going forward, we've decided to separate the cases between those that are below $100,000 and then those that are above the threshold. And we've also separated the reports that we get into two, the non-high profile and those that are ordinary, and the profile ones, high profile ones. with the high profile cases, we look at those that are above $100,000 in terms of prejudice, as well as those that even if they're below $100,000, they are often interest nationally or within communities. So we have separated teams, investigating teams, those that focus on high profile cases and those that work on the ordinary cases. So the Constitution allows us to exercise our mandate without fear and favor, and we're an independent organization is given in the Constitution. So it is not true that we discriminate or we're afraid of investigating those of a high-profile nature. We actually have managed to work on 60% of our cases relate to high-profile cases. In fact, it's more than that.
All right. And in one of its annual reports, ZAC bemoaned poor funding to carry out its work. To what extent has poor funding affected your operations, and what funding model would you recommend?
Actually, it's not really that ZAC is bemoaning poor funding. No. We are actually funded from the national fiscus, and we have always received a very sizable budget, enough to cover our expenses. In fact, ZAC has grown its balance sheet. We've also grown in terms of the assets that we have at our disposal to be able to carry out our mandate. We've even managed to decentralize to a number of provinces, and it's thanks to the funding that we have received through Parliament. The only issue that would be of interest or of note is the fact that we receive our budget in Zimbabwe dollars, and with the inflation and also the exchange losses that happened in I think it was around February or so, that had an impact on our budget. But otherwise, we are funded effectively by the fiscus.
All right, I would like now to take some calls on 0772162651. I have in studio the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, ZAC, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ, as well as a legislator in studio. So let's take some calls. Star FM, good evening.
Hello,
Masquera. Your name, please, and where you're calling from. Go ahead, near contribution yenyu.
Good mafia chichakaitika kana mukuita corruption apana wana rasunga kana chi zeke kushandei.
Alright, tinotenda nemvunzo wenyu. Regai veZAC vari muno vagopindura. I will just ask my panelists to take note of the questions as they're coming through, and then we'll give them an opportunity to respond. 0772 162 Star FM, good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Your name, please, and where you're calling from?
Yes, unfortunately, I can't give you my name because I have a pending case that I was meant to report. But I can talk about the issues that I want to address.
All right, go ahead.
We are in the issue kuti vanhu veZAC ava vanotarisira here kuti vanhu vanoripota macases vanonzi vamutemo, and they know everything about the law. Because when I went to their office, perception pacho mibvunzo yandaibvunzwa ndeye an expert, inotoda kubvunzwa lawyer. Inini ndafambira kuripota, I'm a whistleblower maybe, or someone anongoona angosangana neinformation, but handina detail rekuti ndizive kuti dzinofambiswa sei pamutemo. But when the questions that I faced there, my questions toti ndinofanira kunge nditori lawyer kuti ndikwanise kuti vakabva vatondidiscourage. Saka ndaida kuti vangotipindurira ipapo kuti how do they really make sure kuti vanhu vavo vari pareception, vanhu vavo vari pafront office havasi kudiscourage kuripotwa kwecrime, kuripotwa kwecorruption.
Munogona kutipa muenzaniso here wemubvunzo wemakabvunzwa wamakaona kunge unoda expert?
Issue yekuti yanga iri nyaya yekuti matender process akafrautiwa. Saka vaindibvunza kuti is it a public office, is it a private company, because tender process haishandi kupa private company. I don't know all that. I just know the law has been broken. In fact, vanhu vacho vakatozvibhloera vega pachezvavo. Information yandakasangana nayo ndeyekuti vakafumurana pachezvavo. Saka handina detail kuti ndizoziva kuti is it a private company, zviri up to them kuti vazoona kuti zvandavapa zviya zviya zvino make sense here.
Saka pane zvakazomboitwa here nenyaya kana kuti ndope zvakabva zvangoperera kubva mangosiyana nazvo?
Ndakabva ndangosiyana nazvo because I felt very sorry. Even ndakabva papo denda ndirimbwa ndakaisa muswe pasi pemakumbo because ndakanzwa kuita semunhu anoda nyaya hysteric zvekuti ndakabva ndakabviswa henyu.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo mukoma nemubvunzo wenyu, tichazova pamukana wekuti vange vachipindura. Star FM, hello?
You know what? I would really want to talk to that black lady.
She's listening. Go ahead.
Okay, I would really want her to answer me on that. Because I'm going to give a live example of the things that are actually happening under Zach's nose. Vachiziva.
Takateerera, taurai.
Ngatitaure nezvemataya anoenda kuZUPCO. Anobva kupi? Anobva kuMasasa Park. Kuti aita tires. I did make a whistle blow and ndakachanza number 3 dzangu. Anobva kuti aita tires. Anoendeswa kuZUPCO. Aendeswa kuZUPCO anenge achitonga akaimportwa from another company. Vanhu ivava vanotowina matenda iwayo eZUPCO. Vachipiwa matenda nevanhu vanenge vari mukati memacompanies. But when you try to do that, no one will respond to you.
Right. When you say no one will respond to you, are you saying you've made a report to Zach?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What was the response that you got?
Thank you very much for the observation you've made. I don't know. Maybe that full information was one akupi was this was saying like what the previous caller said. Those are things yotarwa mabawe. So ningo chingozatwa navaruta majira akatoka for this. And the ningo.
Right. Thank you very much for that contribution. Right. The number is 0772 162 I'll take my last caller before I go to the Zach spokesperson in studio to respond to some of the issues that have been raised. Star FM, good evening.
Amaskara sei.
Masquera umapinda mchirongwa taurai zvenyu.
Ndandoroda kubvunzawo nenhau yemapurisa vanotora mari. Sei siri kutomboregedzwa kana kuti handisina kunzwisisa kuti zvinenge zvichifamba sei. Even ukanzi ubhadhare fine, unobhadhara fines, then inonzi chidhoketi zvisipisa varinenge zvitomuri mari yawabhadhara yacho.
Makambozvimhanhara here izvi ende kana makazvimhanhara makamhanhara kupi mukanzi?
Izvozvo zvanga zvambotaurawo previous caller kuti unoita kunge saskam vanenge vachida information but zvinhu zviri kuitika everyone knows.
All right, thank you very much. Regai timbova pamkana wekuti vapindure before we take our next round of callers. So, Commissioner Mlovane, we've had 4 calls. I think akawanda. I know the NPA pamwe inogona kuda kupindura, painopinda, but mombo pindura mibvunzo 4. I'm sure you were taking note here. We are so far.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one on the gold mafia, which was a documentary that was then produced, and a number of issues came up. And the question is, what is Zach doing? I want to highlight that Zach is able to work on, to investigate cases which have been reported to the Commission, and there's a format of reporting to the Commission. The reason being, to also answer the second question that was also raised. The issue is we would like information to be comprehensive so that we can build a watertight case that when it goes before a magistrate or the High Court, we're able to get a conviction. But if there isn't sufficient information in terms of detailing what the crime is, because the crime has to be in line with the Criminal Law Codification Act, which specifically says that corruption, if you go to Section 170 all the way to Section 174. In Section 170, it will talk about bribery. It will say the giver and the receiver of bribes have both committed a crime. The next Section 171 will talk about using a false document. And Section 172 will talk about concealing a transaction from a principal. I could go on. So the issue is if we don't have enough information, it becomes very difficult for us to be able to build a case that can go before the courts, because before the courts, they want evidence, and the evidence is documentary, and they also want credible witnesses. And so sometimes we don't have both, which becomes very difficult for us to be able to build a case that can be prosecutable, that we will submit to the NPA, and the NPA can also have confidence to bring the case before the
I
courts.
would like you to come in. How do you respond to this issue of comprehensive information? I'm looking at some of the messages. A listener whose number ends with 730 says, "Ibasa renyu kutsvaga info iyoyo." How do we, how do you break down the processes, or how do we address that challenge? Ngobani, as a TIZ, we had about 3 callers saying the same thing. Kuti mubvunzo yatinovhunzwa, it's expert questions, or questions that require expert knowledge. And then Zach is talking about we need comprehensive information. Isn't it their role to then act on those leads and investigate?
Okay, maybe I can give an example, because we have got what we call Advocacy Legal Advice Center, where citizens can report cases of corruption. One of the things that we have done is to try and make reporting of corruption within our institution very, very easy. So it means that we put much more resources and dedication in terms of people that can do interviews, or that those interactions, because we understand that citizens are not, some maybe in terms of level of education, and also some are not legal experts, and also some, they only just want to whistleblow, and they might not even have much more details in that. So what can be done is that maybe based on the lessons that or what the callers are saying, it could be maybe a way of improving within ZAC in terms of how can we make the first point of contact very easier to encourage people to report. The toll-free lines, how can they enable citizens to be able to be confident firstly, and also respond in terms of to collect as much data, using the simple terms as much as you possibly can. I think that also becomes a learning curve that the institution can actually have, so that people can have much more confidence in reporting corruption.
All right, you'd like to just finish off responding before I take my next batch of callers?
Yes, I do agree that there is need for us to improve, and I've actually taken note of the issues that were raised, in particular the frontline officers, where they are indicating that instead of being treated like that, we need to improve. Zach, that is, we are admitting to that there is need for us to improve on that. Also, just to say that as another way of intervening, we have actually put aside a department, a unit, that then when we hear these cases, we then send our department to go into that institution to find out, to carry out compliance tests, and also to review the systems. Because sometimes what appears as corruption is in some cases inefficiencies, it's actually mismanagement, it's sometimes administration. So we do have those cases that are reported to us, and it turns out that they're not really a criminal offenses and being committed, but it is in fact inefficiencies. We've also tried to address those areas. So we do take note of all the issues that are brought to our attention. It might be that we need to do a lot more, and we would like to do a lot more.
All right, I'd like to take my next batch of callers. Mu studio medu nasi tine Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission ZAC vanoongorora nenyaya dzeuori. Tine zvakare veku National Prosecuting Authority of Zimbabwe vanomirira matare edzimhosva anezenge achiona nyaya idzi padzinoendeswa kumatare. Tine zvakare veku Transparency International Zimbabwe, gungano rakazvimirira rega rinova watchdog panyaya dzecorruption idzi. Toita zvekare mumiriri mudare reparliament vaenergy mutodi vanova chairperson weparliamentary portfolio committee yejustice legal and parliamentary affairs. Ngatinge tichipinda mune vamwe vateereri vane nhau dzavari kuda kutaura pachirongwa. Namba dzedu dzinoti 0772 162 651. Star FM, good evening. All right, the number is 0772-162-651. Please remember to lower the volume of your radio as soon as you get through. Star FM, good evening.
Evening.
Yes, you're through to the program. Go ahead.
Right. Inini ndandichida ukuthi when it comes to investigations zenyu dzamuri kuita, why is it focusing on vanhu vari low in terms of professional levels? Low professional levels ndo vari kufocuswa rather than vari kumusoro vacho. You never hear of high profile cases zekuti kuna vanhu vari kumusoro vari kuinvestigatewa on those issues. And so,
All right, we seem to have a poor connection asi zvinenge zvanzwika zvanga zvichitaurwa. Ndichazopa probably NPA kuti imbopindura kuti pane here vakabatwa nemhosva high profile, mambotaura high profile akawanda where you actually said Tafara kana muri mujeri ndofunga matova negovernment of national unity nekuti vari kubva kumapoka nemapato akasiyana vari mumajeri. So I'll ask you to respond, but just take note. Star FM, good evening.
Makasimba here.
Tiri pedu makadiwa mapinda mchirongwa taurai zvenyu.
All right. Inini am a legal metrologist. Tinoshanda nema-measurements. So last time, I think it was last year, sakaitika uri mufuel industry room. But no ndobasa redu, ndobasa kwedu isiso. Kutangira kunoiki kwacho zvidzika kuma vanotakura vanodini wese. And then I raised it through, I think it was an email or some other profile. Yandakaona zvangu mu website yezaki yoyo. Ndova ndapindurwa. Ndangonza, okay, thanks very much for the information. Then I forgot about it. And then after maybe about 8 months, some people now tried to call me. Ndimakambofuna about this. So in that frustrated kuti 8 months now people are coming to me so I think whereas I don't know kuti zake maybe I want to investigate some of these things vanongora only silver platter and this kuti nyaya dzacho vanokwanisa kuzibata sei, but otherwise zviri kuitika mufuel industry is just too much. So you want to ignore Saloka, which is about to maybe after 8 months or so. But it's so was it was maybe
all right.
Serious.
Thank you very much. I think a contribution in Nyanzwi kwarega ititora vangu vaterere pa 0772 162651 vadare vari muno vari kuita take note. Tichazoendawo zvekare kuna mumiriri mudare reparamende ari muno kuti zvogadziriswa sei nekuti basa ravo ndere kumiririra vanhu maviews ari kubva kune vanhu avari kumaona sei. Ngatinzwe mumwe mutereri. Star FM, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. You're through to the program.
Yeah, inini maonera angu ka nyaya ZAC effectiveness, maybe it's an issue how it was structured or nokuti ZAC inosunga munhu or inoinvestigata munhu ari kunzaita corruption, but those who are going to prosecute they are in National Prosecuting Authority. We've got high-profile cases that happened that later NPA would say we don't have sufficient information. I would like to give the example. TS Trade Katichitaur. That's where the general population says ZAC is inefficient. We have got corruption akatika kukotko. Mari dzainzi dzakabuda kukotko dzichienda kuAmerica purportedly to buy anonzi twaya tunosungisa cotton bales. Not even a single cotton bale came, but instead mota dzakauya belonging to certain high profile people purportedly imported using that man. Vanhu vakasungwa vakaenda mujere, but at the end of the day those people, they are walking free and they are even competing in terms of political cycles. My election. So it's those cases, that is one case in point. But we have got several cases of people who were taken to court or Wakazasumba 2 days, 3 right remand. Then when they go to Kuma court, vakunosvika vachinoregedzwa kumakoti.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo. Ndofunga contribution yenyanzwika tichida kuti titi gaga kuti vamwe vateereri vakwanisa kunge vachipinda panhaurwa ine ukoshwa yatiri kutaura nezvayo iyi. Vamwe vopinda votaura 0772162651. Ndoda kutora muteereri wekupedzesera tobva tadzokera kune vadare vedu. Star FM, good evening. Star FM, hello?
Hello?
Yes, are you through to the program? All right, we seem to have a poor connection there. 0772162651. Do remember to lower the volume of your radio as soon as you're through. Star FM, hello? Star FM, good evening.
Linda?
Yes, good evening. You're through to the program.
Good, Linda. Linda, corruption in Zimbabwe, to be very honest with you, let's look at the basics. So many issues have been reported. But at the end of the day, what happens, especially with the political gurus, we don't see at the end of the day any convictions. And what do you expect us to do? Rather, for your information, one of the panelists is got dirty. And we are saying we want to fight corruption. What is that? Let's be honest, people want to build our country. Let's be people, when there's corruption, let those people be convicted. Then we know we are going somewhere. That's my contribution.
All right, thank you very much. I'll start with the NPA. If you could respond to the issues that have been raised. Ndofunga manzwazi tari NPA richitaurwa a couple of times pamakolas vedu vapita. Tafara, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I will start with the caller who seems to suggest that we are arresting and prosecuting low-level people. Again, my issue is always about the perception and who has created it. And we then look at the science, we look at the fact, what do we have on the ground. Offhead, right now, we have the president of the Gold Federation awaiting sentence, convicted. We have a former deputy minister awaiting sentence and in prison, convicted. We have 2 former ministers who served their time. They finished, they're out. We hope they have reformed. We have media personalities who are in prison right now. So, like I said, at times a perception is created and it goes around and people mistake that perception for fact.
So how are you dealing with the issue of perception? Because the very same people who should be rallying behind this anti-graft drive, if they have no confidence in the system, how do we fight it collectively? Because it is for the people and they are not part of that. How are you dealing with that? How are you addressing these perception issues as the NPA?
Exactly. That's why we're here on very short notice. We came because we felt it was time that we come and we tell the country what we have been doing. We're not saying we're doing a perfect job, but we have been doing a lot, like I said. So trust me, from now on you invite us, we'll come. Just give us a longer notice, though.
And we appreciate you for that. Zach, would you like to respond to some of the issues that came? Zach, and I'm looking at the millions of messages. They are coming in fast and furious. Zach, Zach, it's a lot. What are you also doing, Zach, to restore confidence in the commission that indeed you are doing this to take Zimbabwe forward? Because it is there in the NDS1. The president at that highest level has said that zero tolerance to corruption. What are you doing to address issues of public perception? Apana Zaki is a toothless bulldog and apana repeat.
There's a lot that Zach is doing, but I just want to also indicate to you that corruption is different from certain crimes. The corruption crimes are not committed in a space where everyone is watching and where everyone can be, whoever would have witnessed it can come forward as a witness. These transactions are done in a way that no one should see. Notwithstanding that, we have also put in place a number of strategies which we are using. We have raised awareness in the rural areas. In particular, the rural folk also have issues that they've raised. They've raised the fact that there is corruption in the distribution of inputs. They've also indicated that there is corruption in the way land is being allocated to people who are coming from the urban areas who want land, and usually they're getting land which are pastures, and they are unhappy about that. So we have received quite a number of complaints and reports from the rural folk, and we have addressed those concerns to the relevant ministries to take note of that and also to address. In the urban areas, we've also conducted awareness campaigns where we indicate to people that would have come to our meetings to say what is corruption, because it's different from other forms of crimes. So we've done urban campaigns, and we've also stepped up in terms of education. We have partnered with the Ministry of Education, primary education and tertiary education, also, so that we then have curricula developed to make sure that we catch them young. So we have quite a number of programs that are running concurrently, and at the same time we've also put in place programs to strengthen institutions, because if you have weak institutions that have no systems, the end result is that they are porous, there's corruption within. So we have also built a lot of work into strengthening institutions. I can safely say we have engaged more than 177 institutions in the public sector, where we've indicated to them the need for them to develop integrity strategies so that they have integrity within their institutions, and also they put in place integrity committees which would then create a new culture, a culture of integrity. And so those are the interventions that we are doing, as well as the usual investigations for prosecution and asset recovery.
All right, and Honorable Mutodi, the issue of whistleblower protection, mitemo tingaitarisire zvarini mitemo yewhistleblower tambonzwa Nxobana achitaura nyaya yokuti ndo yezvimwe inotadzisa kuti vanhu vange vachikwanisa kunge vachimhangara zviri effective vachienda kumabodies anenge ZAC.
Oh, thank you. The Parliament received a suggestion from the ZAC to enact a bill into law which protects whistleblowers, and I'm sure we are working on it as Parliament. There's also a bill to protect witnesses who come to court to testify against corrupt people. We are also looking at that. But let me also hasten to answer the main concern from members of the public that SAC is ineffective and so on. The other issue that we need to focus on is whether our people really understand what corruption is. They need to know whether a law has been broken, compliance systems, whether they've been sidelined, or whether a certain wrong that can actually be prosecuted has been committed. So, like what they are saying, that it's not all about mabawa and so on. Vanhu vanenge vasingazivi kuti corruption iri kutangira papi yaitika sei. So sometimes someone can just come with a perception, apari kubiwa mari, but havasi kuziva kuti chii chiri kutanza kuitika. So I want to exonerate ZAC from such a kind
whose duty then is it? Chirungu chinotaura kuti there is no smoke without a fire. Kana pambo itaka kutaurika ikoko ndiani manje ari kufanira kuzoburitsa kuti aiwa akangori ingori smoke hapana moto. Who then is, whose responsibility is it, Honorable Mutodi?
I think our national broadcasting services has a role to play as well, to educate people on these issues of corruption. And also, maybe ZAC itself can do some awareness through some way to ensure that people really understand the corruption yacho chimbori chi inaitika zvaita sei. Kana munhu aita profit yake akadya mari yake akatenga mota inodhura, corruption here. kana kuti munhu akatenga zvakati achivaka dzimba dzake aita corruption here. Sometimes there is what we call ill-gotten wealth, and there is sometimes what we call business profit, and people must be allowed to do that in a democracy.
All right, and Commissioner Mulobane, in terms of recovering assets, asset forfeiture with respect to crimes committed outside Zimbabwe, how is ZAC asserting its rights to recover properties in countries where it does not have either an extradition treaty or an MOU?
In that regard, we do have what we call mutual legal assistance that we normally go back to because in cases where we have properties that are staged outside Zimbabwe, where there are ill-gotten gains outside Zimbabwe, we do have the National Prosecuting Authority playing a central role in terms of mutual legal assistance. That is the request for information on tainted assets outside Zimbabwe's borders. As you might know, asset recovery is both conviction and non-conviction based. In other words, applications are made to the courts in respect of assets and not persons. So there's no need to extradite the person for forfeiture of tainted assets. ZAC has also made a number of requests through the National Prosecuting Authority, who then request the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in most cases to assist. And memorandum of understandings have been entered into, and these are informal cooperation agreements between agencies. And ZAC has made signed an MOU with Zambia, Botswana, and South Africa, as well as with Basel Institute based in Switzerland. And the NPA is also part of this MOU with Basel Institute. This institute assists in tracing tainted assets and in the subsequent recovery. So NPA has assisted the state to identify and trace assets staged outside Zimbabwe by corrupt individuals. And I can safely say, as of now, we have recovered, since we put in the asset recovery unit in ZAC, within ZAC, which we didn't have a unit like that, but now that we have it, they have since put in place or requests to recover a total of 130 United States dollars worth of assets that are tainted.
And then just respond, Panem Terera Arguyakati, some questions are not being answered. There's a gentleman who called Ajiti, he only got a response 8 months after reporting corruption. Jninke Shimbo Famba say just briefly, as we're about to end the program, Commissioner Mlobane, the ZAC then calls somebody who called to whistleblow 8 months later to say Shakati, and he has forgotten about the issue.
Yeah, I will look into that when I get back to the office to find out what exactly transpired. But suffice to say, 8 months is a bit on the long side. There are some cases that are behind, but 8 months is a bit too long. So we'll find out what exactly transpired. But we take note of the corruption that has been raised in the fuel industry. So we will actually investigate this further and be able to come back to the public and indicate what we have since established and what measures we are recommending to government, because the Constitution requires us to make recommendations to government and other persons on improving the systems and also on making sure there's financial discipline in the market and making sure that there's integrity.
All right. And Tafara, there was an issue here, somebody who called saying kuti NPA nyaya karaswa ichinza hapana evidence yakakwana. If you got that caller, whose responsibility is it? And coordination zinenza kamira sei panana NPA ZAC kuti issue cases oenda yoraswa pamberi pematare dzimosha.
Now, obviously we have our arresting agencies. We have ZAC, we have ZRP. They have a certain bar that the law allows them to act upon, which in legal language we would call reasonable suspicion. Now, when a person has been arrested and the matter has come to the NPA, the bar keeps getting higher. From reasonable suspicion, you come to NPA, we are now saying, is there a prima facie case? Which means, is there evidence that connects you to this case? What you have done, like the legislator was saying, is it actually a crime? Right? And then if you're to be convicted, the bar keeps going on higher. We are now saying, has the NPA proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt? What is the evidence? is the evidence constitutionally obtained? If it's evidence coming from outside the country, has it met the bar? So when you have issues or when you have circumstances where a case comes in and people say, you know, in local language, case yakaraswa, there are a lot of factors that we look at. I obviously can't go into specifics of open cases, but there are a lot of things that we're considering. Because at the end of the day, they say that to become a good prosecutor, you always have to know or have to have imagined that the person who is the accused might be you or your relative. You want them to get a fair trial. So I understand the frustration of people saying case dzine dzakaraswa. Trust me, when it becomes your father, your mother, or yourself, you really want the NPA to be thorough because you don't want them to harass you when there is no case. So it's easy to say it when you are saying it to the next person. But we try as much as we can to be very professional, to be very ethical in our work, because at the end of the day, it's what the evidence says.
All right, and briefly, as we end the program, I'll give each of you under a minute to say their parting remarks, but I'll start with you, Ngobani. What lessons can Zimbabwe draw from other countries, be it in the SADC region, the continent, and the international community at large, as far as fighting corruption is concerned?
Thank you. But before I start this, I want us to understand that corruption within the context of Zimbabwe is more like a culture now. When what the callers have been mentioning, they are telling the everyday experiences of interactions with the corruption, which is something that we need to understand. And when our response in terms of responding to these issues, we need to be alive to those everyday experiences. When people are being asked to bribe at a roadblock, being even asked to bribe for them to access basic healthcare services. So our response, therefore, may be based on the lessons from other countries. We need to ensure that the institutions, anti-corruption institutions, are well-resourced. By well-resourced, I'm saying that they need to be able to have enough funding to investigate, enough funding also in terms of in knowing the latest approaches to corruption as well. Secondly, we also need to ensure that these anti-corruption institutions, we've built enough confidence around them for people to be able to report, to be confident to report to these issues. Then thirdly, I spoke about the issues of the legislative framework. It is one end in simply saying that we have got this legislation, but it is another technical end for us to ensure that those legislations do work for the good of the people, in ensuring that they effectively respond to corruption. So these and other issues are very key when we're dealing with the corruption, and I think it is the onus is on ZAC, NPA, members of parliament, and also ZRP to coordinate and effectively respond to corruption. Thank you.
All right, Honorable Mutodi, briefly as we end the program, your parting remarks regards this issue.
Yeah, what I can only say is that corruption cases is, according to the ZAC report, they include high-profile people, high value, and the cases are of high national interest. So if something is of a high national interest, expectations are high. Members of the public expect that every arrested person or every accused person must go through the NPA, get arrested and jailed. Now sometimes there's not enough evidence to convict those people. So there's need for ZAC to continue to do its awareness programs. We as the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, we are going to get recommendations from ZAC to enact proper laws to ensure that their work is more enhanced and they are more efficient. But also other arms of the government, even the education sector, we are together in this whole process of educating our people on the sources for corruption, how to handle it, and how we can legislate.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mhlobane. You have to be very brief. 30 seconds for you to give your parting remarks.
Thank you. We will step up our awareness campaigns, and we will also make sure that we improve on the reporting mechanisms, and we appreciate the contributions from the public, and we'll also blow our trumpet more so that the nation can understand what we are doing.
All right, Tafara, NPA?
We will make sure that the public knows more about the processes so that they appreciate what we bring to the table.
All right, and as Star FM, we will continue with our role to inform and educate as far as some of these issues are concerned, especially the issue of corruption, which keeps most Zimbabweans awake at night. Many thanks to my guests that came through from the National Prosecuting Authority of Zimbabwe. I had Tafara Chirambira. I had from the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, Commissioner Thandiwe Mlobane, and I had Ngobani Kabangu from the Transparency International Zimbabwe, as well as Honorable Energy Mutodi, who is from the chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. And many thanks to my producer Tanyara Zwakutaura. Until next time, I am Linda Muriro, and it is goodbye for now.
You've been listening to Muriro on Monday. Join us again next time on Star FM.